I oversee our marine debris program of building and construction, packaging, automotive teams. So I've been with American Chemistry Council for 27 years. I want to talk a little bit about plastic sustainability and the things that we're doing to address the challenge of marine debris. There is a lot going on. It's a very dynamic time and a lot happening with respect to our industry and things that we're doing. There are challenges out there, but of course we also need to think about what are the benefits and sustainability attributes of plastics to begin with. That's something that's very important as you consider potential policies and potential. There is great potential for unintended consequences if we aren't careful with policy development, etc. These are our members. One thing to start off. Yes, sir.
Will this presentation be available to us?
I don't know. I'm happy to send it to people. I'm happy to give it to people. So
you can do, if you want to get it to public, we can send it to me and I'll get it on the plastics website.
Okay.
I'm going to send them mine, and I have yours. I can send them both to him.
That'd be great.
I'll send it to you when I get back to the office tonight, or first thing in the morning, depending on how long the traffic is.
Would you back up to your members for 1 second? I want to capture that.
Sure. That's our members. Okay, so the one thing that's important to remember around plastics is this is a study that was done recently. The United Nations Environment Program back in 2014 asked this organization called True Cost to do a natural capital accounting of plastics versus alternatives, or of plastic or environmental cost of using plastics once. The United Nations, that study came up with a natural capital cost of around $90 billion across the entire globe. And so one thing that they didn't really look at in that is, okay, well, how would we reduce those natural capital costs, those environmental costs? Things like greenhouse gas emissions, all the things, different parts of the life cycle, as well as different impacts on the environment. This study didn't look at how would you reduce those costs. We asked True Cost to follow on the study, how would you actually reduce those costs? One of the natural ways you might think of to reduce those natural capital costs and environmental costs of using plastic is to switch to alternatives. That clearly is not the best approach. The reality is the alternatives have about 4 times more environmental costs as plastics does, and that really comes back to the fact that when you look at plastics compared to alternatives, plastics use about 1/4 the material. They weigh, if you weigh things, compare materials, compare products, if you weigh the plastics, you're going to find generally across a range of applications, you use about 1/4 as much material, and that follows through much of the life cycle of the products and the plastics, and you get about 1/4 of the environmental impacts from plastics. So $533 billion is the natural capital costs of using alternatives. So you need to be very careful about anything that would switch to alternatives. To make that a little bit more concrete, a very specific example, looking at coffee packaging. People used to get coffee in a steel can. Much of that has moved to sort of plastic brick packs these days. And the plastic brick packs is one of those ones that actually does use much less material to begin with. And greenhouse gas emissions from the plastic brick pack are about 1/4 that of the steel can, even considering the fact that the recycling rate of that steel can is about 80% in the United States, and the recycling rate of that flexible package is essentially 0 in the United States. So plastic right now, the more sustainable option is the plastic brick pack. Now, we don't stop there. The next step is figuring out how can we recover that plastic from the plastic brick pack and further increase its sustainability profile, make it even better from an environmental perspective. I focused on greenhouse gas emissions here. The life cycle assessment's online on our website. You can look at it. There are other impact categories, the same outcome for waste, same output for several other impact categories. So welcome to take a look at that on our website. Foam food service. I know that's an issue that gets a lot of attention occasionally. Foam food service, one thing people don't really realize about polystyrene foam food service is that product is about 90% air, little air beads in there. And that reduces dramatically the amount of material you use in the first place. Again, across the life cycle, less environmental impact across most of the impact categories compared to alternatives. Another big issue we have in the globe around the world is food waste. Huge issue. I was reading something in National Geographic this morning about how we're going to feed all the people that are around the globe. And we waste about a third of our food right now. So clearly saving food is a very important thing. Packaging, and plastics in particular, perform a very important role in reducing food waste in a wide variety of applications. Bananas, salad, grapes. The waste is down 20% from grapes by just putting it in a package as opposed to providing them loose. And also you reduce the hazard of people slipping and falling on grapes, so that's another reason why people package them. Potatoes, etc., and cucumbers. People often ask, why do you got to wrap a cucumber? The folks have done studies on cucumbers and looked at how long a cucumber lasts. It will last 3 days on the grocery store shelf or in your refrigerator before you have to throw it away. Before it looks like it's all getting all shriveled up and you don't want to eat it anymore. So people throw it away. With a little bit of plastic wrap on it, it lasts 14 days, dramatically reducing the waste. So that's another impact you need to consider. The other reality around food waste is people have looked at the impacts of products versus the impacts of packaging. Groups have done that on a number of occasions. The general rule is about the product has about 10 times the impact as the packaging. So it's something you need to keep in mind too. So growing all that food has, when you get into meat categories and things like that, huge greenhouse gas implications for food that you end up throwing away. And as a society around the globe, we throw away way too much food. Or it gets lost before it ever gets to consumers through not having packaging. That's a huge problem in developing countries. But there are also huge challenges around marine debris that we recognize. We think they're very important, and we're working to help solve along with many others around the globe. The Science magazine a couple of years ago, Jenna Jembeck did a study. This is the sort of nice clean summary from the Wall Street Journal version of it on what the sources of marine debris around the globe are. The problem with marine debris comes from plastics in the oceans. Yeah. Thanks, man. It comes from the lack of waste management in rapidly developing countries in Asia. Many of these countries have no collection for their waste. The largest source is China. Then you've got Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines. Those 5 countries account for greater than 60% of the amount of plastic going out into the ocean. The United States, by comparison, is, even though we use a lot of plastic, is very small. 0.3 of that's total I think this one's around the 12 million ton estimate, opposed to the lower, the range that they show generally is 8 to 12 million. That was the 12 million portion of it. Another study was recently done by the World Bank looking at trash coming down rivers in Indonesia. This is from 2018. They looked at the trash in the rivers. It's not just plastic. The other trash, organic trash, actually makes up 44% of that total waste. And then diapers make up another 21% of that waste. Then plastic bags were 16%. World Bank and the folks doing this study opened up those plastic bags. There was trash in it. Because 40% of the population in this area have no waste collection at all. So they just set their trash out on vacant lots. It rains, it ends up in the streets, the river, into the streams of the river. The conclusion, bulk of the problem is inadequate municipal waste management. Ocean Conservancy did a study on the best way to solve the marine debris problem and plastics in the oceans. They asked McKinsey to do that and look at what the best way to do it was. They looked at bans, they looked at ecoRI, they looked at advanced disposal fees. They concluded those weren't going to be very effective. They concluded that the best way to solve the problem was by having waste collection and management in these rapidly developing countries that don't have any waste collection or management. It's not really a surprise. This is the cost curve.
I'm going to just challenge that, not saying EPR, because what the World Banking said and what also is that they need money for infrastructure, and that the best way that to get money from infrastructure for those countries, and they're all, India and China are now implementing EPR to get money for the infrastructure. So it was, yes, they wanted waste management, but they needed funding for it.
Oh, I agree completely. They need funding for it. They need
Just to, you know. So the solution isn't the money, the solution is using the money for infrastructure.
I think the perspective from that particular study, not to speak for the authors too much, but the thing I took away from it was that EPR was going to be difficult to achieve in some of these developing countries. What would happen with the money?
And that was 5 years ago. Since then, they've all done or doing it.
Yeah, and maybe this was influenced a little bit by the issues that were happening in Malaysia at the time, where all the money was going into Swiss bank accounts. And, so there's some issues going on in a lot of these countries that result in challenges in taking money and putting it where it's best needed. In any case, the system, however you fund it, what you need is basic waste collection, and then figure out what you're going to do with it from there. Recycling, other forms of recovery, etc. We think plastics offer important environmental benefits, and plastics in the ocean is unacceptable, and that we have a role to play in help fixing that problem. Some of you may have seen that yesterday, plastic makers and others around the globe, consumer product companies, waste companies, Suez, and a couple others from Europe, have announced a fund, $1.5 billion fund to fund infrastructure in the major source countries that lack that infrastructure today. It's going to have an infrastructure component to it, big investment infrastructure. This group is called the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. Again, it's a $1.5 billion funded set of investments. We're going to catalyze investment in infrastructure in those rapidly developing countries that lack that basic waste infrastructure. Innovation is a big part of it. New materials, designs, technologies, and business models, circular business models. Education, consumers need to be involved in getting stuff into the waste system, the collection and management system, and cleanup as well. So those are the four parts of it, $1.5 billion fund. Then we expect it to also be leveraged by other organizations, such as we're going to kickstart stuff. We want the World Bank to come in as well. Some of the development funding organizations will also help, and private investment, frankly. Once we demonstrate some of these can be profitable and cost-effective in these countries, get them off the ground, then we expect some more philanthropic investment kind of funds to come in behind and help as well. This is a global alliance. Procter & Gamble is one of the founding members and the chairman of the board for it. But companies from around the globe have invested in this fund. In addition to that, in 2011, we launched a declaration with our partner associations around the globe. These are the components of that declaration. Partnerships are a big, important part of it. Research, the promote enforcement of laws and policy. We have been involved in policy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Spread knowledge of efficient waste management, recycling, and new technologies to further recover plastics, and stewarding plastic resin pellets. We have organizations from around the globe involved in it. Since we launched in 2011, we launched with about 47 associations from around the globe. Today we're over 75 different associations with 355 different projects going on around the globe with these associations to help eliminate plastic in the ocean. The goal of the Alliance is to end plastic waste in the environment. It's an audacious goal and one that we're going to be very active in. Let's take it a little bit back to Rhode Island now. Looking at what are these, that shows the sources of litter around the globe and the challenges that we face in marine debris from a global perspective based on the data and the things that the industry is doing to help reduce that. If you look at Rhode Island, there was a litter study done in 2014 by Environmental Resource Planning, and they looked at, they did this typical litter study that they've done for Keep America Beautiful all around the country. So The large litter sources, the largest source of litter on roadways in Rhode Island, 28.7% of it is paper. 27.1% of it they categorize as composite. That's different kinds of materials, plastic and paper together, aluminum and paper together, different kinds of composites. And plastic is 18.9% of a large litter. Then small litter on roadways, tobacco was 71.6%, plastic 9.6%, and paper 9.1%. So all materials are present in litter, as you might expect. That's pretty typical in what we find and what folks have found who do litter studies around the country. Keep America Beautiful has been doing them for years, and you can look those kinds of studies up. We also work with Save the Bay, Narragansett Bay, here in Rhode Island on partnerships to clean up and prevent litter. One of the things they found through this partnership is that one of the things that really prevents further litter is having a place clean in the first place. So once they've gotten it clean, and this goes, again, Keep America Beautiful has done this and found this similar results in the past. Once you've got a place clean by doing regular cleanups, that fact that it is clean actually prevents people from littering in the first place. So these cleanup programs have driven a result of less litter in this area. Going to policy. Policy, internet or this on the federal level, we supported the Save Our Seas Act and pushed for that, working with Senator Whitehouse to help advance the marine debris protection around the globe. A big portion of that new Save Our Seas Act is federal cooperation with other parties around the globe to focus on reducing marine litter by those rapidly developing countries that are the largest sources by far. ACC also supported and helped lead the passage of the Microbead-Free Water Act of 2015. It phased out microbeads in personal care products. And we also support straw and request policies and approaches. ACC developed what we call our stewardship policy for straws back in January of last year that encouraged people, straw and request type of approach. Reduces waste. People don't need a straw, don't take a straw. That was the approach. And California passed some legislation like that last year. We've also adopted some new circular economy goals. They are 100% of plastic packaging is reused, recycled, or recovered by 2040. Then our interim goal for that is 100% of plastic packaging is recyclable or recoverable by 2030. And in addition to that, we have 100% of our members manufacturing sites will participate in Operation Clean Sweep, which is a pellet containment program to keep pellets out of the environment by 2020. So how do we get to circular economy for plastics? I'm okay. we definitely have work to do there on getting to circular economy for plastics. We think that there's a lot of ways to get there. Of course, mechanical recycling is an important component of that. In addition to that, we also think other products are going to be an important component of that. We've seen companies now that are taking plastics. One company in Oregon in particular, Agilix, is taking polystyrene, converting it back into styrene monomer. They have an offtake agreement with America Styrenics to convert that back into styrene to go back into brand new virgin quality like polystyrene. We think technologies like this are going to be very important because one of the big challenges around plastics is you have a wide variety of plastics that are used, and you need a wide variety of plastics to protect the different products that we've got and protect the foods, have oxygen barrier potential and other things like that. We need different plastics in that. But to make them back into virgin quality again and get them into consumer products, have those first quality type uses, we need to go through a pretty advanced process like this Agilix process to get there. So that's going to play an important role in getting there. We also see designing and inventing new business models. Reusable packaging, for example, can be part of that. Design for recycling is always an important part of it. And these new technologies and new processes and agreements between our companies and some of those companies to take back that raw material and make it back into new plastics. Really important part. We've had programs on recycling plastics for a long time. One of them around rigids. We've seen dramatic growth in the recycling of rigid packaging. This is the latest data we have available. We expect it to go down in 2017 as a result of things going on in China today. But the recycling of non-bottle rigid containers has more than quadrupled since 2007. That's things like yogurt tubs, butter tubs, stuff like that. Most of that is polypropylene, yeah. And then plastic bags and wraps. This is data for plastic bag and wrap recycling and polyethylene film in the United States. Again, there has been very dramatic growth since 2005, more than doubled for recycling of bags and other films.
What is the x-axis? 1,200 units of what?
This is in millions of pounds, sorry. Millions of pounds. So this is around 1.3 billion pounds in the last year. Again, this is probably going to go down a bit in 2017 as a result of the data from China.
We have the total amount produced, though, we're just showing pounds. Yeah, as a percentage?
As a percentage, if you look back at EPA's data, what you got to do is it's a little complicated because there's not a direct category by category comparison in EPA's municipal solid waste report. However, if you break this down to polyethylene bag sacks and wraps, part of the data like EPA does, you'll see the recycling rate started at around 5% in 2005 and is up around 15% in 2016 for the polyethylene bag sacks and wraps categories. I can give that to you or send that to you if that would help. We have a program around the United States called RAP, with our flexible film recycling group does, that the RAP Recycling Action Program. We have partner communities around the country, partner states. Connecticut around here is a partner state, North Carolina, and we expect to be adding others shortly. Wisconsin, and US EPA is involved in that as well. Margaret?
Yep, just quick on RAPS in Connecticut. We actually partnered with DEEP in Connecticut and had a sample in Hartford, and were able to increase recycling rates by 10%. And contamination was decreased by 20%, and that was just in a year program. So it was really a good partnership. We worked with the retailers, the grocers. Price Chopper was huge in helping as well because they already had that program. So it's really the consumer, does the consumer know about it? So it was really getting the message out to consumers.
Yeah.
We are talking in Maine right now, New York, with the groceries there. So we'll certainly be willing to partner in Rhode Island as well. If it's something that the task force would be interested in. It was certainly something that we were heavily involved with in Connecticut. So
Yeah, the big
very
challenge.
positive.
The big challenge with polyethylene film. This is dry cleaning bags, wraps around a case of soda, wraps around a case of diapers, things like that. Wrap around
E-commerce
paper
bubble
towels.
wraps and bubble wrap is
Yep.
one of the biggest things that can go into this.
Yeah, so once you start doing it, there's a lot of material that you can recycle. All you got to do is put it in a bag, take it back to the grocery store, put it in the bin in front of the grocery store. It's pretty easy to do, but people don't know they can do that. They don't know that that's something that they can do. You tend to hear from the local waste collection group and local recycling, don't recycle bags. They don't hear the message, take it back to your grocery store. But there's a lot of material that can be recycled there, and EPA is part of this program helping us get that word out to people. The other part that's important here is the Sustainable Packaging Coalition's involved in it. They have a label called the How to Recycle Store label that gets put on packages that show, take this stuff back to your grocery store. And I think that's an important thing to consider is if you look at grocery bags, because that infrastructure at the front of the stores is really the only infrastructure there is for this film material. So keep that in mind. Another thing in that program we have is called Material Recovery for the Future. This program is working on research on how we can take flexible material and if we can collect it through a material recovery facility and give it a new life or recover it. Even though a lot of it's multi-layer, et cetera, this program, this research program is finding new ways to do that. And we've invested in some infrastructure, material recovery facility in Pennsylvania that is trying that out right now. Right now, best infrastructure for film is the grocery store and front of store collection. But we're working on seeing if we can do this at material recovery facilities. Make flexible packaging recycled in communities around the country. That's the goal. A lot of work to get there. Because we want to recycle that and recover that coffee packaging, for example, but if we work on the way to get there, we've got to work with material recovery facilities to make sure that they get sorted out. And then we've got to work to figure out what ways we can use it to make it into a new product and give it a new life. Probably that chemical recycling that I talked about before would be the route. We also have partnerships with a group called the Recycling Partnership that it does invest in communities around the country and help communities around the country recycle their materials. That's resulted in about 19 million new pounds of plastic being. Our members have all committed to being part of Operation Clean Sweep and all their facilities being Operation Clean Sweep Blue certified by 2020. And that is an international program as well to help make sure that that other countries sign on to it, get their manufacturing plants involved in it, and prevent resin pellets from getting into the environment. With that, I don't know whether you want to take questions at the end or whether you want to take questions now for me. Which way you want to do it?
I think what we could do is have Victor make